PL Swiftwater is not the map most people think of first when discussing the best maps in Team Fortress 2. Instead, people bring up maps like PL Upward for its amazing verticality and mobility-focused gameplay, or PL Badwater for its variety of combat environments leading to decently fair class balance, or even CP Steel for its amazing shortcuts and strategy-fostering design. Swiftwater doesn't get much attention these days. For most, it's simply a mid-rate map, and honestly, that feels like a disservice to its quite smart design. The map is elegantly built in such a way that gets lots of things right which other maps often overlook. The first notable thing that Swiftwater gets right is its use of shortcuts to efficiently reuse space. Let's think back to CP Steel for a moment. That map is built around shortcuts that open up as the game progresses. This leads to the map feeling larger and more interconnected without actually having to build out so much more geometry. It also leads to flank routes and alternate paths that encourage team play and coordination in order to succeed. As a final point, the spawn rooms on the map don't ever have to move, as opening and closing these shortcuts more efficiently regulates the accessibility of certain areas to the different teams. In most payload maps, such as PL Badwater or PL Upward, both red team and blue team have their spawn points constantly moving to keep up with the ever-advancing front line. Because of this, those maps are much longer, are more linear, and also could take more time and effort to develop. Swiftwater avoids having these multiple spawn buildings by taking that note out of CP Steel's book and implementing two shortcut hubs in the map. The first of these being in the center of the map for the blue team to take advantage of, and the second of these being in the red team spawn room for them to take advantage of. As the payload cart progresses through the map, more and more options open up for blue team and more options close down for red team. After the first point is captured, these shortcuts open up for the blue team. After the second, these ones open up. And after the third, the blue team spawn room moves up and these shortcuts open up. Additionally, there are 4 doors in the red team spawn room that close down over time as the second, third, and fourth capture points are captured. To help with the constantly changing map layout, Swiftwater also implements signage features to guide players. For the red team, the furthest forward spawn door is signified by green lights, and locked down spawn doors are signified by red lights. For the blue team, arrows pop out around the first point area to guide players into the newly opened shortcuts. Implementing dynamic guidance props like this is crucial to helping players understand when, how, and why the map is changing. Thinking back to CP Steel, that map struggles in player guidance due to a lack of proper signage. This is a contributing factor to why so many newer players find CP Steel to be the most confusing map in the game. Finally, because Swiftwater is built with all these shortcuts in one central hub rather than randomly spread across the map like CP Steel, newer players have a much easier time understanding and adapting to the map layout. Had Swiftwater not been designed in this way, it's likely that it would also be regarded as a confusing map among the community. Pacing is a part of level design that every designer needs to treat with utmost importance. In order to design a great level in any game, every single decision that you make as a designer needs to be focused around its effect on the pacing. Where sound gameplay knowledge and design will lead to individual sections of a level feeling fun and balanced, it's the good pacing that makes a level as a whole an enjoyable experience. Good pacing keeps players engaged and provides varying environments that constantly shake up the gameplay. A level that's just the same corridors over and over again can easily get stale and boring. A level that intelligently changes things up keeps the gameplay fresh and prevents players from experiencing mental burnout. To see a more poor example of pacing, boot up a match of CP Dust Bowl. For the majority of Dust Bowl, players are simply pushing through one long choke point corridor after another. This by itself isn't the worst, as some classes like Soldier, Demoman, Sniper, and Pyro can thrive in this environment. The issue is that other classes such as Spy, Scout, and Engineer really struggle to keep up and push back against the spam and splash. Oftentimes, playing on Dust Bowl feels like a slog through Soldier and Demo hell that will just never end. Instead, it's always healthy to have power levels of the different classes shift over the course of the map. It leads to varied and engaging gameplay for everyone and never leaves one class feeling useless for most of the game. Every map should have at least one area or section where each of the individual classes in the game are most dominant. It's more fun to play a game to have moments of purpose than to be stuck on the sidelines the entire time. Now let's take a look back at Swiftwater. Swiftwater is a great example of this varied pacing technique. The map shifts from open area to closed cave, to open area to closed clearing, to open area to closed pit. This encourages players to shift up their movement, classes, and battle strategies over the course of the game. For an example of how this pacing affects players, let's follow a blue team soldier through a match of Swiftwater. In this first area, the soldier is able to take advantage of the wide open space and high skybox to jump around, flank the enemy lines, and fire down on this point. This pressures the enemy team to fight at two fronts. Next, when this cave section comes up, the soldier player makes a choice. Either they push into this cave and focus on splash damage and CQC, or he goes around this way through the house and goes behind to flank in the next open area. After the cart pushes through the cave and past the second point, it comes to another confined space. This time though, as it's not in a cave, there is still vertical space to play with, but he must shift his horizontal thinking to vertical in order to utilize it. Next, the cart enters another large clearing. This allows the soldier to return to playing fast and flanking behind enemy lines, just like the first area. To close out the map, the cart enters this pit area and forces the soldier to once again focus on splash damage and CQC. Because the map constantly shifts its environments, players have to get creative and shift up their gameplay over the course of the game. Not only that, it also encourages players to change up the classes they pick and gives those different classes opportunities and chances to become the MVP and the star of the show. The last thing that Swiftwater really gets right in its design is how it modulates the access that the blue team has to the red team's back line over the course of the game. In the first area, due to its openness, the blue team is easily able to get behind the red team's back line either through high mobility classes or this moat. This makes it so that the first point is quite difficult for red team to defend and quite easy for blue team to capture. For the second point, red team generally holds inside of the cave or just outside of it. This means that they're a little bit safer from flank attacks, but still do have to worry about people coming from the shortcut from time to time. Usually, sending one or two players up to defend that shortcut will do the trick. The third point is where things get more interesting. This is the first holding area where blue team has no easy access to the back line of red team. This makes it much harder for blue team to push in and often leads to the game slowing down. But because the distance from point 2 to point 3 is so short, it gives blue team that slight advantage to capping. The fourth and fifth capture points again have no easy way for blue team to get behind red's front line. In addition, because of the longer distance the cart needs to travel and the high ground that red team gets for both points, it makes it even harder for blue team to push the final points for victory. But that's not a bad thing. Even though the design of limiting access to the back line makes it harder and harder for blue team to push as the map progresses, it ends up being a net positive. This design prevents an early capture of the first point to lead to a steamroll victory all the way to the end. As a last note about this increasing difficulty to push in, it also increases team camaraderie and communication over time. In the beginning, players are so spread out that many can find success in more individual playstyles, but as the map progresses, players get funneled into tighter and tighter spaces with each other and are forced to push against harder and harder forces. This leads to players on both teams needing to rely on teamwork more and more as the game progresses in order to succeed. By the end of the game, the map is designed that only a full team push by blue team can secure them victory, and only a break of the red team's full team defenses will cause them to lose ground. All in all, Swiftwater is an awesome yet underrated map. While it doesn't get much praise, it is certainly a wonderfully designed map in many ways. It has easy to understand shortcuts that lead to varied gameplay and efficient space usage. It has amazing and constantly shifting pacing that keeps players engaged in the fight. And lastly, it's harder and harder to break frontline defense structure, prevents steamrolls, and it really encourages players to put the team in Team Fortress 2.